Trudy Mason sitting in for Elias for today and tomorrow. He'll be back on Thursday and I'll be back on news. We are talking now about the provincial budget because it will be handed down tomorrow. This is the CAQ presenting its final budget before the election. What has Finance Minister Eric Girard said about what we can expect? Well, he has said, there will be no election promises or anything like that. We are really focused on responsible management. Okay? He said it will be a sober and focused document. He will propose targeted measures to respond to Quebecers' priorities while maintaining responsible management of public finances. So it looks as though we maybe should not expect any big handouts or any, remember those checks that we kept getting? $500 check here. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get one of those maybe. Ensuring the continuity of public services and providing the necessary predictability for citizens, businesses, and government partners in a context of great uncertainty. That is what the finance minister has said. Let's find out what the MEI, the Montreal Economic Institute, is expecting or hoping will be in the budget. We welcome Senior Policy Analyst Gabriel Giguère. Gabriel, welcome to CJAD.
Hi.
Is what you're expecting more of an election budget or more of this sober and focused document that the finance minister has hinted at?
Well, it seems like it might be something more sober. Finally, after a couple of years at power, the reality right now is if we are looking at the last fall economic statement, which are the latest data available in terms of forecast for budget, we are looking at a deficit of around $9.5 billion, obviously, for next year's budget. Obviously, we'll have the right number tomorrow, but the Quebec government doesn't have a lot of room. When it came to power in October 2018, the Liberal government really put in an important surpluses, a structural surpluses of around $2 billion. Now, I'm talking about surpluses, and I can't even imagine that current government doing so because we had a projected deficit of the year that will finish in the March 31st of more than $12 billion. So we are so much in deficit with that government. They don't have any room for that kind of electoral gift. Now, something that has been said, and it's very important, is that Quebec are still feeling the pain, still feeling the increasing of the general cost. Things are getting more expensive, and so maybe we might see, but I will be surprised, but we might see some suspension in terms of taxation on gasoline. But then again, they don't have a lot of room to act.
We have heard a mention from the finance minister, though, of infrastructure investments. Is that on your radar? So this would not be, simply writing a check to every Quebecer over the age of 18. This would be more along the lines of investment in the future via infrastructure, which I think may be more socially acceptable at this time, given the size of the deficit you've been talking about. What do you think, Gabriel?
Yes, so there is two parts of the budget, and it's a good thing you are talking about the infrastructure part. So we are usually talking about the operation budget. So the government is spending around $165 billion for healthcare, for education, for transportation, family, all department and program related to those departments. Now, there's also what we call the PQE, which is basically the infrastructure plan from the Quebec government, which is, we could say, the capital budget. But the reality is that when the CAQ government came to power in 2018, the capital spending were around $11 billion. Last year's budget was more around $19 billion spending. So it has increased immensely. So during that time, what we saw was that our Quebec infrastructure, namely road, school where our children are learning, hospital, are degrading very fast. The condition now is poorer than when the CAQ came to power. And so we are putting more money for our infrastructure in the last couple of years, but they are in the worst state possible in the last couple of years, this year compared to years before. And so this is a very tricky situation where the Quebec government will need to think about solution outside of only putting more money. Because let's not forget that in April 2005, we had, unfortunately, sorry for this, but basically the S&P 500 decided to say, well, Quebec is not as good as before in terms of credit. So the Quebec government basically received that message, and a part of this reason obviously was the fact that there is no credible plan to return to the to our budget balance, the balanced budget, I should say. But there was also the fact that there is always more and more capital spending. So it will be tricky for the government to find the right approach, but there is a limit for the government to spend always more, not only in terms of the operational budget, but also in terms of the capital budget. So road, hospital, and schools for children.
Gabriel, I'm going to go back to the gas tax because you raised the point that there is a lot of pressure on the Quebec government to find a way to ease gas prices by, and you know what, all levels of government, I think, are hearing that in other jurisdictions, find a way to bring down gas prices. But there's been a call here in Quebec for the province to renounce or some way return the part of revenue it is profiting from due to the rising costs of gas. In other words, don't look at it as a windfall to expand programs or to finance programs, but return it to motorists. But you're saying you don't think they have the room to maneuver to do that.
So there is two parts of answer for that question. The first part is I do believe that they need to do that. Simply because if they are making more money because consumer is paying more, basically they're getting richer because we're getting poorer. I don't believe it's a right system. So because it's proportional, and right now as we speak in the metropolitan region, it's more than 40 cents up from the beginning of the Iran War. And so because of this, we are paying a lot of money for gasoline, and government is making money. So obviously, they need to give it back to people. I still don't believe it's enough. I really don't think it is enough, because the reality is that in Quebec, we are paying more for our gasoline, except compared to British Columbia. But for the average Canadian, Quebecers are paying more because the average Canadian had the chance to saw the abolition, or at least the suspension, of the federal carbon tax on consumer, which was 17 cents in 2025. They didn't pay for it. But here in Quebec, we were not under that federal carbon tax because we have our own cap and trade. And so because of this, we are still paying way more per liter of gasoline. And so the Quebec government cannot simply look at us and say, well, it's a very sober budget and we're doing what we need. Those are political talking points. I don't think that families in the Greater Montreal or even across Quebec will be satisfied with political talking points, but with less taxation to make sure that money are still in their pockets.
No, I think you're right about that. Gabriel Giguère, thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Gabriel Giguère is a senior policy analyst at the Montreal Economic Institute think tank, the MEI.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Everywhere I go, kids wanna rock.